Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grow With Us. My name is Evan Barton, and I'm your host who helps create conversations with the movers and shakers of a growing tech center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Grow With Us is a podcast that highlights the work of In Tulsa and informs you about the exciting and innovative work being done around the city by its best and brightest. In Tulsa's mission is to connect talented individuals and companies to stimulate economic growth in Tulsa and to create more prosperous communities across the region. Each episode, Grow With Us discusses the growth of opportunities, the growth of communities striving for change, or the tech and innovation that is changing the landscape of Tulsa. This week, we are in conversation with Teresa Bigelow, publicist and founder of Spiral5, who will be chatting with me about founding a boot camp, moving to a new city, and democratizing the PR industry. Thank you so much for being here, Teresa. It's so good to have you.
Thank you, Evan. It's great to be here.
Yes, I'm really excited about this conversation because I've got to have a couple of interactions with you, Teresa, that have led to this moment where I'm sitting across from you right now, which is really exciting.
Yes.
I got to step on the stage of a Clubhouse event.
Yes.
Which was so cool. That was my first time ever using the app. That
was when we were talking about intuitive communication strategies.
Yes.
Yeah. We were getting a little witchier.
It was so cool. I was like, I mean, a lot of people know this, but like, or at least about me, but like women like are very, very influential in my life. Like the first 5 people that I would say have like influenced who I am as a person would be women. And so like being in that space, like, kind of as a male identifying person in a unfamiliar, I guess, industry, I was like, I think that everyone knows that this is like a cool thing and they're just talking about it in so many cool ways. I don't know. I was really into it.
I love that. I love that you felt comfortable. We consider ourselves the Publicisterhood is kind of how our cute name for ourselves. But the way I put it is like, it's anyone who identifies with the sisterhood. So, that can be men as well. So we're not gender specific to women, but I'm glad that you felt comfortable in our funky little Clubhouse room.
Oh, yeah. It's so cool. Well, yeah. I'm so excited to get into this episode. Teresa, go ahead and tell me your story in kind of whatever way you feel comfortable.
So I graduated. So I grew up in New Mexico, really small town in New Mexico, ended up in San Diego for journalism school. When I graduated school, I felt this desire to do big things and realized San Diego was probably not the place to do them. And ended up doing your classic move across the country with 2 suitcases and $1,000 in the bank account, and showed up in New York City with no plan, no job, no friends. And like 3 weeks later, everything just worked out wonderfully.
And ambition, that's all it took.
Having heart, ambition, being willing to kind of go through some gritty spaces, right? Like I was living in a $600 a month teeny room in Brooklyn, but I was just stoked to have a roof over my head. And I was willing to be a hostess at a French restaurant on the Upper West Side. And I was willing to kind of go through all those motions because it was an adventure. That ultimately led to getting a job in PR, which I hadn't known very much about. I came from a journalism background, like I said, and that was kind of my goal, was to be a magazine editor in New York. And a tech PR agency who I had interviewed with back in California happened to get in touch with me right after I moved to New York. And they wanted to hire me as their first New York employee, basically. So I didn't know much about PR. I didn't know anything about technology. This was like 2012, before like the tech scene was really well known. Like it was kind of still this kitschy thing that tech bros kind of just gathered at Soho House. And like it was a kind of mysterious place for me to be in. But it ended up being really valuable. Of course, now we know that understanding the tech industry is one of the more valuable pieces of knowledge and skill sets that you can have through your career. So incredibly grateful, and did that for a couple of years. And while I started to learn the tactical strategies of public relations and what it involves, I realized that, it's not rocket science and I could translate it to other spaces. So, for instance, I started doing, some freelance work with my uncle, who happens to be a very well-known bluegrass musician, and was able to get some really cool magazine features for him. And I'm like, I think I prefer this freelance gig. But I also was super young and I didn't have a network really or enough experience. Went to India, did my yoga teacher training. I went to Thailand and just sort of did the whole like, I'm going to backpack around Southeast Asia.
That's
and
so cool.
of course, freaked my parents out because they're like, but your career. And I'm like, yeah, but the beach. And I was learning a lot about myself. So yeah, during that 2 years at the PR agency, it's the being around other what was called the female founder movement.
Yeah.
I think people don't say that as much anymore, but back then it was like, I'm a female founder. And it was actually really inspiring for someone coming from small town New Mexico. And so it lit that entrepreneurial spirit for me. And I don't know if I knew how to channel it or express it.
Oh.
And so it was coming from a place that maybe wasn't as aligned. So when I kind of got off the career train and I went to India and I did my yoga teacher training and I ended up in Thailand. There was something about it that helped me learn so much more about myself.
Yeah.
So the time I got back to New York, I had felt that 6 months I had grown and I had achieved, quote, so much more than I had in the first 2 years of my career working in more conventional. So all of this was kind of starting to like build my values around what career should be about and what business and creativity is. I ended up working with a music streaming service. I was in-house PR director, living in India. So I would go between New York and India.
What a commute.
Like an 18-hour commute, let me tell you. It was quite a bit. But it kept life really interesting and I learned a lot again. And then I realized, as awesome as this company is, I just don't want to work for anybody else. I want to work for myself. So in 2016, I started my private PR practice, independent consultancy, and essentially did that until late 2021, where at this point, I would say I've transitioned into more of like a founder role. But Spiral5 has kind of been in motion for several years, and we'll talk about that. But what's important for you to know and for this conversation is that in 2019, I decided to make the move to Tulsa with a program called Tulsa Remote. Yes. And here I am.
It's awesome. We get to call you a Tulsan now.
Yeah.
Would you call yourself one?
It's been 2.5 years. I think I'm there. Yeah.
We'll claim you.
You know what? You grew up here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you say I'm a Tulsan, then
yeah, I get final say. I just want everybody to know that.
That's right.
No, I think that's so. I mean, oh my gosh, you have so many things I'd love to talk about here. Like, first of all, where'd you grow up in New Mexico? Because I lived in New Mexico before.
No, you did not.
I lived in Santa Fe for about 4.5 months.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I grew up in Silver City.
Okay.
It's in the southwest part of the state. It's really tucked in the mountains of the Gila Wilderness, and you have to want to go there.
Wow.
But I recommend visiting.
Oh, yeah. Well, every part of New Mexico, I'm like, I think everyone needs to visit that place. It's so cool.
It's special, isn't it?
Yes. Well, and let's talk about the main part and just the part that I'm really, really wanting to kind of learn more about is just this entrepreneurial journey. Like, I think I love the way you laid it out, because I think that it's so interesting to kind of mark passages of time with also where your career develops. And just, it sounds like what you were saying is that you were just learning more about yourself. The more experience you got, the more experiences helped you refine and understand your value system that you can now lean on to become your own boss and your own founder of your own company, which is so, so cool. So yeah, and that's so cool. I love that we're going to get to talk about that some more. Let's talk about Tulsa too. How has Tulsa been kind of maybe a catalyst, if that? What would you say? How would you describe Tulsa as like playing a role in Spiral5?
Oh God, so many ways. And first of all, I have to kind of acknowledge that it was so unexpected. Mm-hmm. I mean, my friends were really used to me taking off and traveling and moving to India and moving back and being kind of all over the place. But when I said I was moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma, it was like shock, like what? This was before COVID. So during COVID, a lot of people started to make moves and realized more rural areas provided a higher quality of life, more affordable. But this was kind of before that became normalized. So it was really strange. And I think what what I was learning over the course of my 8 years in New York and stints in India in between was that I just like to experience things that are new and different. And also through that process, I kind of came back into my roots, which is community, smaller town vibes, a little bit more of a low-key lifestyle as my full-time space, my full-time home base. And I also realized that I still love the big city, the glamour, the events, the parties, the networking. Like I love all of that. And I'm still really connected to just like a really down-to-earth kind of arena. So that was my initial interest in joining Tulsa Remote. And that also started, and then I started, but I can't ever just be somewhere without feeling connected to it. Like I want to feel involved. I think a lot of people have moved here and they're happy to just live here and buy a house and make some friends and go to happy hour. That's totally fine. Nothing against that. I really want to like feel integrated. And I already had this collective of independent publicists in New York, and we were pretty informal. We would just get together every quarter or so. And the idea was that we're all working independently, but we might as well have some colleagues and some support systems around us. So if somebody, needs to take a week off or they're out of town and their client has an event, you can call on somebody who knows what they're doing to step in and help you out.
That's huge. That's like having backup, basically.
Yes. It's like having colleagues without the office politics is what we say. And that was working in like a fun, informal way, but it wasn't really something I could monetize unless I was going to really lean into the community and the membership side. Yeah. And I just didn't feel like that was a real need. And so as I got ready to make the move to Tulsa, and as I arrived here, I can't really remember what it was that inspired me initially, but I think part of it was that I had a friend who wanted to learn PR. Mm-hmm. And she started working with me first as just like a fun, like, let me help you out. And then I started paying her, and then she kind of was pretty good. Like she was getting some good results. And it wasn't something she wanted to pursue as a full-time career. But what I realized was that this is learnable. And I also thought how many women are in areas like Tulsa who are super savvy and smart and are looking for flexible, freedom-based kind of lives and opportunities where they can integrate their personal and professional lives and be home with their kids or, just do their own thing, travel, and who I could then connect to the network I had acquired through New York and globally. Entrepreneurs, of artists, of creatives who really have cool stories to tell but can't afford a PR agency. Yeah. And then I also considered the number of independent publicists on the like more seasoned side who often need part-time support. Yeah. And so I developed this idea of the entry-level freelancer and a starter publicist. So somebody who maybe has professional skills that they can translate to PR or is just out of college and wants to dive into their work, into the workforce as freelancers. Tulsa was kind of the inspiration for connecting the dots between more rural areas and the cities in a way that hadn't been done before.
Yeah, I would totally say that is the almost like charm a little bit of Tulsa is that I think we've said this on every episode, but like Tulsa has that partially small town vibe, but also like you said, kind of these amenities of the big city where you do feel connected to a network that's maybe having happy hour, going to parties, or even just there's an urban presence about at least where we are right now in downtown.
Totally.
Yeah.
Which is totally necessary to actually keep people here.
My gosh. Yeah. And I think that also that entry-level person that you're talking about is going to be, if they have a history with Oklahoma, they're going to probably, maybe this was me a little bit, but resent their small town and want to change. And Tulsa is a great, I think, intermediary for, like a big New York move or like a big LA move. Like you get to try living in a city that's a little bit faster paced, but not too fast. But also have some of the same comfortabilities of what you're used to, like your roots.
Yeah, and it's like the access. I think part of what makes Tulsa so wonderful in the community here that was a huge I know this is a question for later, but a huge part of me staying was the energy around creativity, entrepreneurship, diversity, like developing these kind of, next generation paradigms. And that, of course, opens up access to nationwide opportunities, which Tulsans may not have had, without that type of dynamic.
Oh, yeah. That's we're going to get into this, which is so cool. But I think it's a huge thing to highlight now is just that where we're at with, right now we're in February of 2022. I'm going to mark the time. The remote aspects of our jobs and like being able to enjoy the luxury sometimes of just working from home and having this more dispersed lifestyle, I think is more appealing because it also allows us to understand what our worth is a little bit too. You're at least for me, it feels like I am understanding that my labor is valued regardless of where I'm at, and I can do it from the comfort of my own. We were just talking about how I've left my house in a couple of days, but it's so nice. Like I get to have that comfort because that's my place, and I also, it's also just cheaper to live here. We all know that.
Yeah, well, that was a big talking about values and how those map to Spiral5.
Mm-hmm.
The agency to design my life was the most important thing for working on my own and for going out on my own as a publicist. I just didn't want to have to go into an office when somebody else wanted me to go into an office. That was me personally. And I developed Spiral5 as a platform to help other women discover that type of dynamic. And it just so happened that COVID reared its ugly head right after I started developing the infrastructure for Spiral5. So it was such great timing because now you had this normalization and also people starting to get used to what it's like to be able to work from home or work from wherever, work from paradise if they want. It's kind of all amazing how like the values of Spiral5 started to become externalized in the world in a really big way.
Which is awesome. It's that definitely helps you have a platform for launch, which is huge. And I
felt
think
kismet. Totally.
Yes, I think that you've also like capitalized on that, which is awesome.
Oh yeah.
We've kind of talked about some of these a little bit, but like, what are some elements of a city that help you personally just feel more comfortable and likely to call that place home?
Creative, culture, music, art. Personally, those are really important to me. Feeling like there are high-minded, conscious humans around. I have acquired a really solid group of amazing women who are similar to me in that we're interested in personal development and spiritual development, and we enjoy travel, and we also enjoy staying home and working on our businesses and being super focused. So that, I think people are crucial. That's number one. And I've loved the music scene here. A fun little anecdote. Prior, yes, anecdotes, and then just put a pin in the people and the arts and the creative. But like 6 months before Tulsa Remote was even on my radar, so it was 2018. I had been listening to so much electronic music because that was kind of the world I was living in New York, and suddenly I got this desire to listen to more roots and like country, but not country, like not like West, not pop country, but like old timey country and blues. And I discovered JJ Cale completely, just probably on Spotify or something. And I loved it. I was like, this is my jam. I had no idea. I didn't even know about Tulsa. Like it didn't even occur to me as a place. I didn't know JJ. I didn't know there was anything called the Tulsa Sound. I didn't know Eric Clapton covered most of his, like most of a lot of, let's say, I didn't know a lot of Eric Clapton's hits were part of this like Tulsa Sound movement. And then Tulsa Remote comes up. Actually, Tulsa Tomorrow originally brought me here.
Gotcha.
With a weekend event. And then I met Tulsa Remote. And that's where I discovered that this artist I had fallen in love with in the last 6 months had created the Tulsa Sound. And I was like, okay, all signs point to Tulsa.
Yes.
But to that point, the music scene here has always been really fun for me. And I think it's because it's just so different from what you can access anything in New York, but it's not on the same kind of fun dive bar. Like I love going to Mercury Lounge and It's not like the type of dynamic that you have going out here is never going to compete with New York City. And I like that. I think if they tried, I wouldn't appreciate it as much.
Ooh, that's a good point. I think that a lot of people want to say, or a lot of people might, like you're kind of alluding to, want us to compete with those other cities instead of carving in like a newer identity or like our own version of what live music is like. Which I think that Tulsa already has that. And it's had that for a while. Just, I'm so sad that we're still in the pandemic where our music scene is so directly impacted by the pandemic. But we're going to get there where I'm being hopeful. But I'm also glad you got to experience like what that music scene was like before the pandemic, because that's the Tulsa that I knew when I left. And I was so excited to return to, but things happen and we're going to get there.
It's coming back. It's back in small doses.
Exactly. I'm really excited for some stuff that we have going on. And I think that you're so right with people, arts, and culture. Like that's the main thing that I think for me, I would say helps me get attracted to a city. Can I do things there? Can I meet the people that are interested in doing the things that I like to do there? And then can I also pour into a community is kind of another thing that I find really interesting. And is there a culture that I like, I don't know if the right word is prescribed to, but just like aligned with? And I think that I mean, obviously I'm still here. I think that I'm creating that culture for myself too. It's almost like taking what's there, applying it to yourself, and then giving back is kind of the way that I think about this things.
Yeah. And you left, right, and came back. And where did you go?
I was in New Hampshire for almost 5 years, which is wild. Very, very different than Oklahoma, especially when you're talking about that rural
East
versus
Coast.
Urban thing too. Because Hanover, New Hampshire is like, it's like an oasis of wealth in terms of like the city. But then as soon as you're outside of it, you're in a very rural place that is very, very similar to Oklahoma, except for the fact that it's all concentrated. You have a concentrated rural area, whereas Oklahoma is so spread out rural area, which is really interesting to kind of dissect the differences between.
Yeah, well, I think the boomerangs, as they call you guys, are super impactful because you go out into the world or the other places of the country and you learn new things and you experience new things, and then you bring it back and then you find ways to create that in Tulsa, which is that's what cultivates this unique blend of worldly, urban, and still the prairie.
Yeah.
And I love like what Tulsa Creative Engine has been doing cool little events, and I love Fire in Little Africa. That type, not that I'm not like a huge hip hop fan, but just like the existence of it.
Yeah. For
me, it shows that there are people thinking differently.
Yeah.
And
you know them personally. I don't know if that's something that means something to you, but I love the idea that I might know someone that is like a creative director for those things because it's one connection away.
Yeah.
Or I know people that are putting on the event, and I go to that event and I get to like hang out with the person that put on that event because like we follow each other on Instagram. That's all it takes sometimes. It's so serendipitous.
There's just more access to the people doing cool stuff here.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Which is always fun. I like to feel like a VIP as well.
Yes, exactly. So now tell us all about Spiral5 and everything that you all do.
Yay. Okay. My favorite topic. One of my favorite topics. So Spiral5 is essentially a career development / PR agency hybrid. So we do work with all levels of clients. I personally still run clients on a level of culture, innovation, alternative health and wellness and lifestyle. And then what has happened in the last 6 months is the incubator portion of our business, which includes the 8-week training in the PR fundamentals, and then goes on to a 12-month incubator in which the women, some men, are essentially developing their skills as PR business owners. And through that, we're connecting them to smaller scale clients, startups, entrepreneurs, creatives who need part-time support, but who are not ready or cannot afford a PR agency or even a more seasoned senior publicist. we still have senior publicists in the network as well. So remember I mentioned that our first version of Spiral5 was a community of independent publicists in New York. So they are now our senior publicists, and they're wonderful because they often help to hire and mentor our starter publicists. And then we still share resources. We have events, we have guest speakers. So it's truly kind of this ecosystem of publicists on all levels and clients, all through the lens of freelance and independent work, which is why we consider it, democratizing PRs. We talk a lot about that from the perspective that traditionally PR has been kind of contained within these big box PR agencies. And then over time, those have now, kind of synthesized out, or they've sort of spread out into more boutique agencies. And now we're going even further, where you're seeing people go out on their own as independent publicists. And Spiral5 essentially breaks that down even more with the apprenticeships, the entry-level freelancer, the people who are in their first year or two of being a publicist and entering PR through this lens. And what's cool about that is if you have a 35-year-old in Kansas who knows she could do PR, there has not been a way for her to enter the industry. We're trying to change that.
Yeah. Breaking down barriers to access are so huge. I also love the idea that it's entry level or just wherever you're at. It doesn't, you get to approach this program and approach Spiral5 with the pretense that it's okay that I don't know anything and it's safe to fail and learn.
Yeah.
That's so awesome and so needed right now. I think for just reflecting as a 24-year-old like who didn't really know what they want to do. I still don't know what I want to do sometimes. It's so enticing to know that there are communities and organizations out there allowing us to fail and allowing us to learn from those mistakes and really put us on a path towards success.
Yeah, it's to figure it out. It's modular. You don't have to go to school, get a bachelor's degree in public relations or whatever it is that you would consider doing. There's a lot, they call it the reskilling and upskilling industry, which I had not heard about until recently. And turns out Spiral5 is doing that, which is cool. And it's, any stage of your career, you can tap into one of these boot camps. There's lots for the tech industry, and reskill or upskill what you already know, and then get connected into job opportunities. Yeah.
And tell me about the remote aspect of it, because I think that that's a very crucial part. You mentioned this like almost anecdote of like some woman in Kansas. Well, it could be some woman or some man or some person anywhere in the world, and that's a huge part of why Spiral5 is so exciting to me.
Yeah, exactly. It can really be anyone. We're focused on the US right now, but we're looking to go global at some point because we do have that network of potential clients as well. But we have starter publicists and senior members in New York and San Francisco. We have them in Atlanta. It's cool to see how one of our starter publicists in Atlanta, we have through our course, our online training, we connect the incubator participants to a practice project. So they are essentially learning the material with a real business. Yeah. And so one of our starter publicists in Atlanta was matched with one of the Fire in Little Africa hip hop artists in Tulsa. So you kind of start to like create these nationwide connections. Yeah. So that's what's possible because it's remote. And from a values perspective, I'm really excited about helping women develop really flexible career paths and have agency, have their own businesses, which if you look at part of what I did a lot of research on the MLM space, like the industry. And I personally think that can be extremely misleading, but they kind of market the like girl boss. And the reason why they're able to be so successful with women in the southern and Midwest states in particular is because these women have the same desire for flexibility, for control over their own lives, to run their own businesses, like hashtag, like, the quote girl boss mentality.
Gatekeep, gaslight. No.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what my friends say.
They have they still want all of that, but they don't necessarily know they have the access. So then somebody, LuLaRoe, whatever, comes around and is like, hey, like here's a business in a box and you're going to make all this money. And it's, for most people, it doesn't really work out. But to me, that was a sign that there was a desire for impactful or to do something that was their own and create something that's their own.
Yeah.
And so from a values perspective, being able to develop something that's remote for these women and men or people is
autonomy,
cool.
I think, is a great word to describe this, because I think that career autonomy and independence, both of those are something that like I think if you look at previous like career trajectories for some people, or just like looking at the job industries out there, that independence and autonomy are sometimes what you compromise when you go down a career path. And this is a huge way to have that in your own hands.
Right. Well, so women we're encouraged to either be entrepreneurs in like a startup founder type of dynamic, like go raise capital, which is really difficult. And the majority of venture capital still goes to men. And the other side of it that's glorified is working your way up the career ladder, which you're giving up a lot of your flexibility and autonomy. Solopreneurship is in many ways kind of ignored, and it's not in the same way glorified as a path for women. And I actually think it's one of the best.
Yeah, I'm very glad you are on this path, because I think it's so huge, especially. I don't want to I guess like I don't want to incorrectly associate this to like a feminist like perspective, but I do think that it's really important to understand that empowering women is really a huge byproduct of this initiative, and that it's so needed because a lot of industries out there are not empowering women. And that is the sad truth.
There's a lot of, and BIPOC as well, there's a lot of diversity and inclusion strategies. And what I've noticed with Spiral, I mean, we're still learning a ton, but at least what I noticed with the application process, just through posting on LinkedIn and Indeed, 60% of our inbound applicants were LGBTQ, BIPOC, Indigenous, Latinx. And that was just completely organic. And I'm like, well, here's what happens when you change systems. Exactly. You attract different types of people.
Yeah. That's the democratizing part. That's democratizing the access in practice. And I hope you get your flowers for that. Like, I hope you know that you're that you're appreciated in the space.
I appreciate that, but it's certainly not something I would do in order to have flowers. But I love flowers. I'll take them. Thanks, Evan.
Of course. So kind of to round us out on this conversation, let's talk about Spiral5 and Tulsa, that relationship. How would you like to see Tulsa grow in the near future, and what might help us keep attracting talented entrepreneurs coming to the city like yourself?
I love the startup scene, and you guys is kind of recruiting startup. And I think the tech industry is wonderful, but there are so many other industries. The majority of the people looking at Spiral5 as an outlet for their PR are actually coming from more lifestyle, culture, arts, creativity, music is big. And I think that those elements actually are what make a city interesting for the development or the flourishing of a tech industry. So for me, I think a huge piece of Tulsa's growth is going to be the ancillary, the arts, the lifestyle that can be further cultivated in order to allow for these really economically impactful industries to thrive.
Teresa, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
I could talk for another hour, but I won't.
I know. We'll have to get
I'll let you eat lunch.
Yes, that would be, we could talk forever. I love that. Tell us, or anyone that's listening, kind of how they can get involved with you. What's going on in your life going forward, and how can they stay connected? Yeah,
well, more than happy to chat with anybody in Tulsa. So if they want to reach out, I'm Teresa at Spiral5.com. Spiral5.com, there's lots of info. There's, the higher page details all of our packages and offerings for people who are looking for affordable PR. And then, the incubator page is for people who want to take a look at the application. We accept applications on a rolling basis. We'll probably start our new cohort in April. But don't quote me on that. It's a moving target at the moment.
Yes.
But yeah, I think head to the website, shoot me an email if there's any interest. I'm also really looking for ways to integrate further into Tulsa with Spiral5. Right now, we have 3 starter publicists out of 15 in Oklahoma. And I think that there's a lot of room to develop that and increase that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
We're here to network for you too.
Sweet.
Thank you so much, Teresa.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you so much for being with us on this episode of Grow With Us. And for our listeners, I'd like to plug a few resources that might be helpful for you. If you would like to stay in touch with all of our featured jobs and opportunities at InTulsa, then please join our talent network. You can join at talent.intulsa.com. That's talent.intulsa.com. By joining our talent network, you will get access to our newsletter where you can stay up to date with our latest career advice, featured opportunities with InTulsa partner companies, and our placement success stories. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts and anywhere else you listen to be notified when more episodes of Grow With Us are released. And let us know what you think by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. Huge thank you to our editors at Rant 9 Studios and Jesse Ulrich. This has been Grow With Us.